Right. Thank you, Louisa. So today I will be talking about what we started at WSDA for 507 inspection documentation. I just have a few slides to begin with, and then I will do a walkthrough of the checklist and tool. Okay, so since 507 is still relatively new to the feed world, not exactly prescriptive, just to account for the flexibility of the various types of facilities covered, we started building documentation tools for that reason. We do receive classroom training from FDA, but with the complexity and the variability of the rule, we wanted to outline some goals for our program. Okay, so the first goal we outlined was to improve accuracy, making sure observations are made in the right area of the regulation. Consistency, so standardizing inspectors as much as possible to be consistent in similar situations and to be more uniform in their documentation. And then efficiency, to help do their jobs faster and be more organized. And then effectiveness, that we are inspecting and educating in an effective and clear manner. So we created different mechanisms for the different subparts of 507. So for a cGMP inspection, we did a checklist form. We went this route because cGMPs are considered the baseline standards or the foundation of 507, if you will. So most cGMP inspections will be more or less similar, but to account for flexibility, we built that into our answer options that you can see there on the right-hand side. So for instance, in is for in compliance, out is for out of compliance, N/O is not observed, N/A is for not applicable, CDI is for corrected during inspection, and then another option being TA for technical assistance. TA is not currently on our existing checklist, but it has been proposed as an option for certain situations. So it is currently on a draft version of our checklist, which is what I'll be showing you later. And then anytime out, CDI, or TA is selected, the inspector is to provide observation comments. To help meet those goals I talked about earlier, we also started a draft marking guide. This is in the very beginning stages, but would help with instructions, nuances, when to mark observations, or identify certain circumstances. Marking guide would be a resource for inspectors similar to what the guidance for industry is for industry. It would draw from that guidance for industry and then also other examples observed out in the field. So for subpart C and E, which are the preventive controls part and the supply chain program, we went a little bit different route than a checklist because PC inspections will vary a lot more than a cGMP inspection. We went with an inspection tool. So this tool is much more adaptable than a checklist, and it's utilized however the inspection leads, or however the inspector's flow is aligned, and then to keep the inspector organized. In Washington State, we haven't tested this tool out in the field yet, but once we do, we plan to make our tools available so that industry can do self-inspections or self-assessments. But if you were at the last AFCO meeting, I did present this concept during the Inspections and Sampling Committee, or the ISC. And so the ISC formulated a work group. They are still in the beginning stages and now have a few volunteer states to provide feedback for the tool. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, this is a draft because we recently proposed to add the TA option answer, or the answer option. It begins with basic firm demographic information at the establishment functions. So what is being done at the establishment? What types of feed are they producing? Here you can see the name and title of the lead inspector, If there's training or auditing going on, that training officer, the auditing officer's name would go here, date, and then time of inspection. This box here shows our inspection authority that's in law and rule. And then this first section is general. It's questions basically asking, verifying that the firm is subject to subpart B of 507, which is the cGMP or current good manufacturing practices subpart. Additionally, we do have a question here, which is number 4, that would help identify if the firm would potentially meet the qualified facility definition. So our existing checklist looks very similar. It's almost exact, except with the added answer option, we decided to go with a drop down instead of what we previously had or currently have is check boxes. So this is our current one, what it looks like. I'll go back to our draft. And so we have check boxes, and so the inspector would select the appropriate type or answer. We have a reminder here that if out CDI, which corrected during inspection, or TA, technical assistance, is checked for any of the following questions, that they're to be explained in the comments, and then our answer key right here. The following questions or sections really break down subpart B of the regulation. These questions are either exact wording or just slightly abbreviated or reworded for space. But if you hover over any of them, it pulls up the regulation citation exactly. You can see that. I hope you can see that. But it's pretty helpful. Okay, so it's just breaking down the sections. So first is personnel, plant and grounds, sanitation, water supply and plumbing, equipment and utensils, plant operations, holding and distribution, and then records. And then we have a small section here for other activities performed by the facility. So that'd be any pertinent other activities. And then the comments box. So the inspector would relay back to a question that they had out, CDI or technical assistance. So for instance, section Roman numeral 2, question 3A, and then their observation. Okay. And then the last section is post-inspection. So if there were any corrective actions needed, they would be documented here, and then along with the timeframes that the firm agrees to. So, and then the name and signature and date. So our checklist is pretty straightforward. It follows the regulation very closely. Okay, so let me go on to the PC inspection tool. Okay. So because there is a lot of documentation associated, or there can be a lot of documentation associated with PC, this tool was designed to help review, to keep it organized and ensure that all components are covered, because there's quite a bit. A big goal of our program is to develop more resources and tools for industry, specifically for 507. We thought it was crucial for industry to have the same mechanism that we have to help verify if they're meeting PC requirements they may be subject to. So we drafted up this version for that purpose. So this tool, it hasn't been piloted out in the field. We just conducted our first and only so far PC inspection just prior to the pandemic. We've only piloted out in the office afterwards. But the version I'm showing today is the industry version. The inspector version is very similar, pretty much identical in some areas, just the context is different. So for instance, both versions have pretty much the same answer options, but so say for instance, TA was selected on the industry version. That would kind of denote that you would want to reach out to a colleague or a regulatory partner to verify something. Whereas on the inspector version, if they note TA, it would mean that they provided technical assistance. So it's just context. Once we do pilot these sufficiently, we do plan on posting a checklist and tool on our webpage so firms can do those self-reviews. If there's enough interest, we could even do separate training class or video just on this. Another difference. So for instance, we took out the N/O in the industry version for not observed because that just it doesn't apply here. This tool is formatted in Excel, and it's done so that it can be completed electronically or printed out. If you look towards the bottom, we have different tabs that covers the different sections of the regulation, mostly subpart C and E. Subpart C is the risk, hazard analysis and risk-based preventive controls, and then subpart E is the supply chain program. So the top here is the resources, and I have this blown up kind of pretty big so you can see it well. So it may kind of make things a little wonky. But under the instructions is just a little box for resources. So we hyperlink to the regulation, the draft guidance for industries, the IOM or Investigations Operation Manual, the FSPCA Participant Manual, the FDA Technical Assistance Network, and then our contact information. And to format it for printing, I did have to abbreviate a lot. So all of those abbreviations and acronyms can be found there, right here on this first tab. So let's move on to the first tab of food safety. You really can follow the order of the tabs or any other method that you choose. It's really up to you. But say we start with the food safety plan. So you would just go through and fill in any of the gray shaded cells. So for this first two answer options is in/yes and then out/no. It really depends on how the question is worded. So it could be either you could go through there and type in, you know, in/yes or whatever the answer is, or you could write in X or a check mark. It's really adaptable. This first column right here is the citation, so you can find exactly where this component is in the regulation for more information. And then some cells do have pop-up information that just gives you a little bit more things to consider, or also kind of direction on where to go next in this tool. So it just covers, you know, the requirements in the food safety plan, reanalysis, and if you see this continued here, that just means there's a page break when printing, and then records requirements. There is a records requirements section in each of the tabs since that is a requirement throughout the regulation. And then, so say if you had, let's say you had PCs, but you didn't have written monitoring SOPs. You could say, so we recommend that if there's anywhere where you have an out or a TA, you could highlight it just to make it stand out, so you remember to follow back or follow through. And then in the comments column, you can make a note for yourself or for others. So for instance, assigned to manager Bob to be completed by May 30th, 2020. So just kind of simple notes. And then if you are subject to subpart C, or the risk-based preventive controls part, you would have to have or if you want to do it voluntarily, you would have to have a hazard analysis. So this this more information does direct you to the hazard analysis tab. And so you basically would just fill in where the shaded gray is. Here is just a random number of known or reasonably foreseeable hazards that you would work through using the guidance for industry or any other resources you have available. If you have more than this, you can right-click, copy, right-click, insert copy cells. If you have less, you can right-click and delete. These columns here are if you have additional hazards that are not really required. Say if your firm has identified hazards that are more on quality as opposed to safety, you could put those here. And then you're working through your records requirements and your written assurances. Some of the tabs do have definitions that are straight out of the regulation, depending on if there's any related to that tab or not, just to kind of have that handy. Say if you do, you have your hazards and you work through all the components and you have identified that you want to control it by a PC, then you would go to the particular type of PC that it is. So let's say that you had two process type PCs. You could right click this tab, over copy, create a copy, and then choose where you want it. And then you could rename them to keep them organized, whether you want to number them or change them to a specific identifier that your firm uses. And then you would just follow through all the requirements for the specific types of PC. Same for sanitation PC, if you have that, and other PC if you have that. And then if you have a supply chain program, same, where you could rename it if you like. Supply chain program is a little bit more, components in there depending on the type of, your supplier and everything. So you would use, instead of it being outlined like this, you would just type in yes, no, CDITA or NA. Requirements. And your specific definitions, because there are, specific definitions of supplier that you want to pay close attention to if you do utilize the supply chain program. And then if you have PCs or want to do so voluntarily, you'll want to have a recall plan. And so you can work through this tab. This one's pretty simple. And then there are other sections of the regulation that talk about modified requirements. So I outlined one example, such as a warehouse that there's no processing or packing occurring. They just hold feed. But say if they hold a feed that is temperature controlled, they're subject to these requirements for temperatures and monitoring those. And then, having their records. And then lastly, the qualified facility, which we will be completing pretty soon. But that's our inspection tool. While I have a little bit of time, I want to highlight a couple pages on our website. So if you go to our main web page, and I have our program page bookmark, but if you go to our main page, which is agr.wa.gov, and search Animal Feed Program, we are the first one that comes up. This is our main page, and we have our mission and vision, a video. We do have a COVID-19 information page, which can be very helpful currently. So that's linked right here. But the two pages I wanted to highlight today is our inspections and sampling page, and then our technical assistance and compliance page. So let's start with the inspections and sampling. This page outlines and describes the different types of inspections that we perform, and then the different types of samples that we perform. We have, so for instance, hazard analysis. Well, and it also gives a little bit of assistance and resources. So we created just a kind of guide to help qualified facilities that can be found here. And then at the bottom, you can find our sampling results that we publish every year. Okay, then let's go to our technical assistance and compliance page that we created to just compile links and resources to assist the animal food industry. This is where you'll be able to find all of the presentations today and the recordings when they're available in this animal feed education and trainings section. Any future or any materials from future trainings can be found here as well. And then we have this section for helpful PDFs and web links, because other sites can be pretty difficult in navigating with information in multiple different areas. We wanted to have them grouped together as much as possible by topic in one place. So you can see, so there's PCAF for Preventive Controls for Animal Food information on all these links, food facility registration, food defense, foreign supplier verification, other hazards. So there's just a lot of helpful information here. One particular requirement in 507 is that you do have to provide training on animal food hygiene and safety and employee health and hygiene to your employees. Since there are not a lot of resources out there, we did compile some links of where you could direct your employees to for that training, or what options that you could modify to fit your firm's needs. And then lastly, if you do end up having a food safety issue, animal food safety issue, you could conduct a root cause analysis to help determine what the exact cause was. And then that would help you reanalyze your processes or culture to prevent it in the future. And that's all on our webpage. And that's all I wanted to share for today. So I can take questions.
Thank you so much, Ashlee-Rose. That's just an incredible amount of work that you've put into it and an incredible amount of resources. And I'm glad that we are recording this and that you have shown people also the web pages that they can go to for a lot of tools that they can use in their agencies. So I am seeing a couple questions coming through. Let's start off with, what kind of documentation is provided to the firm following a WSDA PC inspection?
So currently we've only done one inspection, but so we are required to provide with resources, like we definitely provide the guidance for industry document, but directly following the inspection, we only provide the what is it? So I'm blanking.
The summary of
Thank
inspection.
you. Thank you.
Team help, team help. Thank you.
And then because it is newer, we take all of that information and notes back and write up our reports and our checklists and everything. And then it gets processed and then it gets issued to the firm. So it's after the fact, but hopefully that'll change in the future so it's a little bit more direct and closer. But they do on the summary of inspection, we do outline if there has been any observations and what needs to be done and everything like that. So there is that information available.
Okay, so is a copy of this inspection document available?
So we don't have it on our website currently because they're draft versions, and we do want to pilot it a little bit more, but I don't foresee it taking too much longer um, to be able to kind of provide to everyone because it could be really helpful because there's a lot of little components in 507 that can get lost. So just want to help as much as possible.
Yeah, it looks like you have really thought this well through and gone into even very nitty-gritty opportunities and options for people to decide on how they're going to move forward or back or where on the whole implementation. So, is there any plans to develop a tool similar to the one shown to help with compliance with FSVP requirements?
Not with WSDA. We, if I'm speaking correctly, we did not adopt the FSP CFR, so we don't have authority to do those inspections. So that would be relied on, at least in Washington State, on FDA.
Okay. People really like your tool and want to know, is there an estimated time when it could become available?
I will work super hard to get it out as much as possible and get it drafted or piloted. But yeah, that's the reason that I created it because help is needed. So I thought it was but I'm not sure. We have a busy year going on. We are, if you're familiar with AFRIPS or Animal Feed Regulatory Program standards, which is a 5-year cooperative agreement. We're in our 5th year, so we're about to be audited by FDA pretty soon. So we're very busy group right now, but it should be pretty soon. Fingers crossed.
You're under pressure now. Well, and I hope in the evaluations, folks can let us know whether it be useful for us or for you actually to put on a training in the future, going maybe more in depth using this tool when it does become available. So giving that kind of feedback would be great.
That's definitely an opportunity we'd be open to.
Okay. Yeah, and I hope that, this inspires other folks to create something like this for their use, and then we can start to share these kinds of tools. I'm not seeing any more questions. Anybody else have anything specific? Um, it's okay if you don't, and if you think of something later on in the day and you want to just, put your question in, you can say, "Hey, regarding Ashlee-Rose's presentation, I'll have one more question." You can ask it there, because we'll definitely be monitoring the chat box. So
And certainly email us as well. We're always available.
great. Someone says, "I've been out of the animal feed program for 3 years. It's incredible to see how far the program has come during that time." Nice work, all of you. Well, thank you for that great feedback as well. Okay, well, thank you, Ashlee-Rose.